my friends and fishes, and welcome back to another tail making video. Today I want to talk to you guys about the T-Rex inspired mermaid tail, and I want to talk to you guys today about the actual design process. Hey my friends and fishes, did you guys know I actually have a full series of ebook tutorials available in my Patreon pod shop? I cover everything from mermaid tail making tutorials about making extra fins, how to install hidden zippers, mermaid tail design theory and principles, and I also have some bundles available, extra goodies like my pocket palette, which has a wonderful array of palettes for you to choose from if you're like me and you sometimes struggle with color palettes. I also have scales available, as well as extra fin and fluke shapes that you can use to print off and actually create painted mermaid tails. And again, all of that is available over on my Patreon pod shop. I'm going to make sure that there is a link somewhere in the description box down below, so be sure to check it out. Now back to the video. So how did we T-Rex? Like, where did that come from? The client came to me and they were like, hey, I want it to be based off of T the Rex, who is a sort of a human-sized-ish puppet. Like a person, I think, fits on the inside of this beautiful kind of animatronic kind of a puppet kind of a guy. So the client provided me with these two pictures and they were like, you know what, here you go. And go to town. So sometimes clients will have a more concrete idea of what they want me to create. Other times it's like, nope, here's your reference image and just go forth and conquer, which was kind of what this was. In my mind, I'm like, okay, T-Rex mermaid tail, like, Step one, I take those two reference images. I found a few additional reference images of T the Rex and I threw those on there. I grabbed some fish reference, real life fish reference, and from all of that I sort of selected some of the colors of what I thought based off of the images that I had. And lighting and stuff is always a thing, my dudes. And I kind of put together a rough color palette. Now all of this is just so I have something to look at. Just my initial visual thing, my mind can start to take pieces and mix and match and do. So once I have that kind of outline for myself of what the elements might be, I go and I kind of break it down and I sort of look like, what are the key things that make T the Rex, and not just any other Rex, and also what makes a Rex, right? What are the things that I could incorporate that say, like, predator, right? That say dinosaur, also prehistoric. What are the colors? What individual little pieces can I use from this dinosaur to create a mermaid tail? So some of the things that grabbed my attention right away were his stripes, his overall kind of greenish colors, the very detailed texture on his skin, all of his pores, any sort of cracks, the kind of more reptilian scale look. His brow ridges were a big one for me. And then the sort of like plating that he has down the fronts of his legs. And of course, one of the most commonly asked questions that I've gotten in the process, like over the time that I've worked on this tail, and people are asking like, oh, well, what kind of tail are you working on? Well, I'm making a Tyrannosaurus Rex mermaid tail. And they're like, oh, where are you going to put the little arms? And I love it. It's a very literal thinking is what that is, right? And am I going to make these little arms like little fins is everybody's first initial question, like where are the little arms going to go? And my goal with this tail was not to create something so like obviously literal, like not like a direct copy and paste onto a mermaid tail, if you know what I mean. I really just wanted to capture the essence of T the Rex and kind of the species, you know, Tyrannosaurus Rex. And I wanted to take that sort of essence, right, and put it on a mermaid tail and kind of what would a mermaid tail, specifically a mermaid tail, be if it was this kind of a, you know what I mean? So it is never just like a copy and paste exactly one thing to another, because a T-Rex isn't a mermaid. I mean, although I have heard apparently they're good swimmers now. We've decided that. In the fossil record, we're seeing like toe scrapings. We think T-Rex could have been a good swimmer. So who knows, maybe T-Rex was the first mermaid. So I kept my first few passes at this very loose because I struggled with something which I didn't know how to name. Okay. Aphantasia is apparently what this is called. I can't visualize, like, so if I close my eyes and you tell me to picture an apple, I conceptually, like, I can comprehend what an apple is. Okay. Like I know what an apple is. Green apple, red apple, whatever. Okay, I got you. But I don't see anything. I see it, but like I feel it at the back of my head. It doesn't make any sense. If you struggle with this and you kind of know what I mean, you're like, oh my God, like how do you cope? Put something on the page. Accept the fact that the first thing of whatever it is you're going to do is going to be kind of bad. It's going to be kind of trash. Don't have a blank page. Blank page is just death. Don't do that to yourself. Just put something, a scribble, a splash of color, whatever, it doesn't matter, just do something. And what that allows me to do is I can look at that and I can process it. Now I'm starting to do the math, right? I'm like, okay, I like this, I don't like this, I like this, I don't like this, and I further refine it from there. And that's how I visualize. And so with each pass, right, I'm starting to build up those details. I'm starting to find the things that I like. Oh, I like the teeth here, I don't like them here, or I like this texture maybe here or here. And I keep it very loose, right? So I even say texture, but I am working with a single brush. We're not getting fancy with the spices just yet. I usually use kind of a medium, hard, soft, round brush, right? So that allows me to build up a little bit and kind of throw some color down and erase in and erase out. I love me some masks. I'm forever masking everything. I love to just throw a big splash of color and kind of just work around it, right? I'm just keeping it loose and very sketchy. I don't want to commit to anything until I have a chance to kind of work through all of the problems and all of the struggles and then you can start to refine it, because the biggest, and I don't want to call it a mistake because every artist is going to have a different way of working, and I do personally know some people who the first line they put down, that's the first and last line they put down. I know these I'm not one of these people, but I do know these people. During this time, I'll have a lot of back and forth with the client. So during the sort of concept phase, that's when we have all of the back and forth. You don't like this fin here. You want me to change the size of this. We want a different fluke shape. You want different colors, whatever. Like, now's the time, right? During that concept phase, because we do eventually lock it in so that I can move forward and not worry about big changes and things happening. You want to make sure you really hone in on what the vibe's going to be before we, dive off the deep end, so to speak. And so, like I said, I use typically for the concept phase, I use just one brush. As far as programs, I will use either Procreate, or in the instance of this tail, I used Photoshop. It kind of depends on how I'm doing. If I'm having a bad pain flare, I'll work in bed, and so I'll work on my iPad. Or if I'm able to work at my desk, I'll work at my desk. Both have their pros and cons. I love Procreate. I love Photoshop. All my final designs are done in Photoshop, so sometimes it's just better to work straight in there. And other times I have to do a little bit of both because, my body's not always super reliable, which kind of is poo, but what are you going to do? So you just kind of work where you can when you can. But Procreate and Photoshop are the two primary programs that I use. So once I get to the point where the client and I are both really happy with the design, from there, I will move on to what I call the polish phase. And the polish phase is really about refining those details. And during this phase, I will also input the client's measurements, build up all of my base shapes. So if I need specific shapes for the dorsal, or for the pec fins, and for the seam fins, and for the fluke and everything, all of that gets built using the shape tool in Photoshop, so that it's easy for me to manipulate and move things around, and also in preparation for printing, because eventually this gets sent out for printing and I need to be thinking about all of the different pieces I'm going to need to make this thing, a reality. And I tend to work in a lot of layers. It's not unusual for me to get up into the hundreds of layers. It's happened. I'm not even sure what my biggest file in terms of layers has ever been, but it is not uncommon for me to get into the hundreds of layers. I put a ridiculous amount of time and effort and detail into my mermaid tails. They're definitely, for me, the custom work, well, all of my tails really, are more than just kind of slapping a design on some fabric and calling it a day. I really do view my mermaid tails as prints of my artwork, basically, like a three-dimensional print that you can wear of my artwork is kind of how I've always viewed it. I know not a lot of other tail makers really view it that way. I am not shy when it comes to putting in a lot of detail, for sure. So as the sort of need arises, right, I will create brushes, stamps, whatever it is I feel like I'm going to need for this. I'll start to kind of build up my little library, as it were. A lot of it is still hand painted, and a lot of it is existing brushes that I've been making throughout the years. I do make a lot of my brushes myself, and they all have sort of a different purpose. And with each tail, usually each tail requires me to make something new. It may not be a brush, or maybe a stamp, or it may be a texture, or what have you. And I just start to build up that library so that I can use them on future designs. So while I'm what I call rendering the design, which sounds very much not artsy fartsy at all, while I'm hand painting this painstakingly, but I just feel like rendering is just like, I'm just trying to make this as realistic as possible in, well, you know, in keeping with my style, which is generally a little bit more of a soft realism. I think it's more a little bit animated because obviously that's my background. That's where I come from. That's where I come from. So what are you gonna do? I'm thinking about contrast. I'm thinking about lighting. I'm thinking about all of those things that I've already mentioned, the textures, patterns, all of the fine details. I'm keeping things separated across many, many layers for easy adjustment and easy access. And as I'm kind of getting to a stage where I'm happy with it and I show it to the client, we have a little bit more back and forth. My clients are made aware, like if you wanted big changes to be made, that's something that we would need to be doing during the concept phase. This is more for like, oh, I'm just thinking that, oh, maybe I see a little something here. I just like a little marking, or I want to just change a little stripe pattern here. Or well, maybe we could do like a blended waistband, which is something that we ended up doing for this tail as well, which was something the client had asked for and I promptly forgot. So thank God I noticed, because like, whoosh, I'm telling you. And then we have little back and forth conversations like that until we're both like, okay, yep, this is it. This is the final. So we're not going to get into the actual making, like the sewing part of things. I have so many videos on my channel. Like if you're new here, welcome, by the way. Hope you're having fun. We're a great little fam over here. I'm going to leave you guys a playlist for you to check out that has all kinds of tail making videos. I've been doing this a long time, like I said. So there's a lot of content if you want to see me actually sewing and doing and all the things, but I wanted to keep this video focused on the design side of it. So talking a little bit more about the design before I answer some of the questions that you guys asked me specifically over on Instagram, I was looking to create something that fell into that more traditional mermaid tail aesthetic. So this is very obviously a mermaid tail, right? This is not alien in any way. This is a fluke and some fins, okay? And a body to go with it. And I wanted it to have those ancient prehistoric elements that make T the Rex not only T the Rex, but also like T the Rex, like the Tyrannosaurus Rex, right? I wanted to have as many of those elements that I could within this very much traditional looking mermaid tail. So I incorporated the brow ridges of T into the sort of bum spines that I have down the back, those front leg plates that are down the fronts of his legs. I incorporated those down the sides of the fluke, which I thought was fun, and also a little bit on the like kind of trim on the fins as well. I added teeth to the tail, and in the concept you'll see they kind of moved around a little bit, but I wanted to have the teeth somewhere, so I did add teeth to the kind of ankle area of the fluke, and I did add a little bit of gum. I didn't do that originally, but as we kind of went through the polish stages, I was like, you know what? He has just a little bit of reddening around the base of all of his teeth, and I think that that would just be like an extra little Easter egg, if you will, that's just really says T the Rex. I kept a really close eye on how I was rendering the texture off of his body. I gave him a light underbelly and a dark back, and I of course incorporated those stripes, which I actually like. I went on and I did trace over, not for my final drawing. This was just so that I could get a flat look at what his body looked like so that I could take from that and create my own elements to make the design that you see on the tail itself. So I wanted to make sure that I had just all of the things so that you could really have the feel. Like if you were to see these two things side by side, you would feel they were related, but it wasn't like a literal impression of the same thing. I hope that that makes sense. Let me know if that makes sense. Overall, I'm really pleased with how this tail came out. I did learn a lot making this tail. I had a lot of fun with it. Honestly, like I know I say this all the time, I'm a huge dinosaur nut. Getting to make this tail was an absolute dream. I am so over the moon thrilled. I want to make another dinosaur tail. I want to see how much further I could push this. I have ideas for my own that I might want to make. Giganotosaurus. I didn't hear anything. What was that? Did you say something? So I have my trusty iPad here. Are there times where 3D printed on fabric fins are better than the real sewn on? Flat printed fins can be a wonderful cost-saving alternative if you don't mind having them not be actual tangible fins. Honestly, I can achieve some pretty amazing stuff with the printed fins as opposed to the actual like tangible 3D, because you do lose some of that edge and some of that sharpness, and you also have to deal with the floppiness of fins, which we have had to with this tail as well. However, with this tail in particular, I feel like it worked, like the 3D fins work in favor of the overall design. So I feel like for this tail in particular, it works better to have the be actual real fins. Okay, next question. How many times have you redone a custom design until you were happy with every possible square inch of it? Oh boy. Oh gosh, that's such a tough one because I don't know if there's ever been a time where I've been 100%. And I think there's actually another question asking something similar momentarily. I'm just gonna say that I do, because of how I work in the stages, like I mentioned, it isn't uncommon for me to like redraw the same thing over and over and over again with the subtle changes that I make each time to really kind of nail down what it is that I'm doing. So let's just say many times. We're just going to say that for now. Okay, how much of a custom commission is a client design inspiration, and how much is your own creativity? So it definitely meets in the middle. I will say there are some clients who know exactly what they want exactly this, and they just kind of do that. I do tend to lean away from those. Like, this is my artistic outlet. This is how I kind of let fly my creativity, and I don't always like to take the orders that are just like, here, copy and paste this, because that's not great for me as an artist. Okay, so here was the other part to that question. How do you know your design is ready to print? I could keep tweaking forever. And I could too. There is such a thing though as over designing a design. And that sounds really like counterintuitive because like, what does that even mean? Like what an out there idea, but it is possible to take a design too far. And I think it's just practice and just also in knowing, like when I worked in animation, that was something you just had to know. You had to know when you have a deadline to hit and you have to know, okay, I've made it this far. That's 90%. That 10%, you got to leave wiggle room for your lead and your art director to give you feedback. And then that's that, and it's done, and you ship it. And it's the same thing. Like when I worked as a lead, I had to make those decisions like, okay, is this far enough? And so I think that I have experience from that, and that's where I get that from. I think it's just something that over time, I think if you are somebody who struggles with that, something that you could do is keep multiple like iterations of your file so you can go back and kind of compare and start to see where, if there was a point where you could have or maybe should have stopped. Because sometimes if you over design something, it just starts to look either muddy or it looks just too tight. You lose that looseness that makes the artwork kind of speak to people. So that's a whole other thing. I don't know if you want me to talk about that more, maybe let me know. But again, like this is my first time really discussing this kind of stuff with you guys, and so this is a little bit strange to me, but I hope you're enjoying it so far. There's more. Okay. More generally, how do you use Greyscale? I've never been able to figure it out. So Greyscale is wonderful. Now, I am somebody, ironically, I don't visualize, but what I comprehend is always in color. I can't turn that off. I don't see in black and white. I mean, oh, yes, I do. My life I see in black and white, but when I am trying to comprehend something, I'll never see something in grayscale, and I don't like working in grayscale. As an artist who worked in animation, I had to be able to, because when you're doing concepts, you're not always working in color. The client wants to see an idea and not be bogged down by, oh, wait a minute, you've made color decisions now, right? Like, yo. So you want to make sure you can be able to do that. What I use grayscale for is to check to make sure my values are that there's enough contrast in the tail that when you're looking at it from a distance, everything's not the same. That's not good. Sometimes it can't be avoided. I have another tail currently where I did try to incorporate that in there, but the colors that the client likes are of the almost identical shade. So when you put on grayscale, it's like one flat piece of color, but you can see with your own two eyes that they are two separate colors. So it's an interesting kind of a balance. But what I'll do is I'll put a white layer over the very top of the entirety of my image while I'm working, and I will set that to hue, and that will give me an idea of what the values are in my image. So I don't know if that's helpful, if that's what you meant, but if that didn't quite cover it, feel free to ask me another question down in the comment section and I will do my best. How do I make scales look 3D? So when you're designing your scales or you're designing other elements that need to feel like they're 3D, we'll take the teeth on my tail, for example. I do my lighting direct, like as if I'm looking right at the design and then down, so that the light is coming from like in front, but like a little bit down. So the shadow is always coming this way and the tooth is coming out that way. And that's the kind of the thing that you want to, I could do a tutorial on that. If you want that, now's your time. Okay, my channel is in a huge flux kind of a state at the minute. You got something you want to see mermaid tail related? Let's go. Let's go. Comment down there. Do it for me. Okay, so that's part of the trick. Having also less is more. Less is more. If you need to make something pop, the thing that's coming off the page needs to be the brightest at the front, at the top peak of your design needs to be the brightest, and it needs to get a little bit darker and less saturated the closer you get to the point it's coming off of, so that it looks like the light is hitting that part first and it's kind of coming down. So something that will be very helpful is to actually look at real life, do studies of lighting in real life, practice, get your phone flashlight, hold it against something and move it around and see, and try and find that neutral, so from straight on to the tail and a little bit down. And that's the cheat. And people go nuts over it. I don't know if they're pulling my leg or what. I think it works, right? I get comments, oh, I feel like I could put my fingers underneath the thing and I can't, and I feel like I should be able to. And it took a lot of trial and error to get there. That's the cheat. That's how you do it. Now, the last question is wonderful. I love this one. So more or less related, but where did I learn, like, where did I get my design skills from? So I am actually a classically trained animator of all things, okay? I went to school for, we used to call it classical animation or traditional animation, which used to be on paper. Did you know? I ended up going back to complete the circuit, as it were, with 3D animation, which was not my jam at all, unfortunately. But the design elements and the design things that I learned and the skills that I have started there. I've always been an artist. I did 5 years of what would you call that? Like a mail away kind of a school. It was a work at your own pace kind of a schooling. And I did that. I also did a lot of night school classes as a teenager. And then when I graduated, I did summer school program as well. Did my animation training. I worked in the animation industry for almost 10 years. And did freelance work as well. And I've been doing this, of course, since about 2006-ish is kind of when I started making tails. 2008's when stuff kind of got rolling. Then 2011 was the YouTube channel. 2015 or 15, there's a video, so you should be able to find it, is when I started making the printed tails. But the majority of the skills that I have that I actually apply specifically to my mermaid tails actually came from when I worked in mobile games. I basically designed monsters, dragons, creatures. I even got to design a mermaid once upon a time. That was really cool. And that's where a lot of this came from. Learning to use the shape tool, working in a lot of layers, masks, file organization, just even some of my skills. You know, I had the real good fortune of working with some incredibly talented individuals. The artist who sat next to me could render gold. Like I did a Loki inspired mermaid tail once upon a time. The gold that I did on that, I only knew how to do because I sat next to just about the most talented individual. She could render metal like you've never in your life. I still can't even. I don't even. How? And then I had just 2 amazing art directors. The first one, sadly, didn't get to work with him for very long, but he was always very encouraging of what I was creating and what I was doing, and he really helped me build a lot of confidence in myself and my abilities. And then my second art director on that team really kind of pushed me outside my comfort zone a lot, but also let me ask questions, and not in like a I'm questioning your authority kind of a way, but he just seemed to understand. Like, he just understood how my brain worked and was like, oh, you just need to know why? Oh, easy peasy. Like, here, let me just, this is what I'm thinking, right? And so a lot of my design sensibility that I've kind of honed, that I use now, comes from that. Some of the things like, you know, little elements, you know, these wonderful people have all had, you know, a profound impact and left an impression on me. And there have been other artists as well who, you know, little pieces, like I'm constantly paying attention to, as part of being an autistic person, I am always observing, I'm always watching. I used to have this kind of motto. If you know where it comes from, the fact that I made a dinosaur tail should not be surprising to you. Observe, listen, learn.
Observe.
was what I used to tell myself. I'm such a dork. Do you guys, why are you even here? Seriously, just, you can go now. It's okay. But I always observe what other people are doing, and I'm always listening to feedback and thoughts, and I'm trying my best to learn from each experience and everything that I do. So that is the long answer to that question. If you guys have more questions you'd like to do, I don't know, you'd like me to do more of this kind of Q&A back and forth, talking about art and the creative process and all of the things, feel free to let me know. I'm here for you. I would love it. I don't feel like there was much else I wanted to say about this tail. You know, it was made for the fish fin monofin. It's got the usual zipper, 2 pec fins, a dorsal and 2 seam fins, blended waistband. You know, something else that I always, one last tidbit, something else that I always think about for my tails is I try to factor in damage as part of the design. So there's a lot of texture down the sides of the fluke, things that I'm trying to think about to prolong the life of the tail as best as I can, because it is fabric, right? That is part of the thing. But otherwise, you know, a huge shout out to the client who commissioned this for me. I'm just so thrilled that I got to make you this tail. I think it turned out amazing. I really want to keep it. It's fine. I'll let it go. I'll make myself a dinosaur tail one day and it'll be great. I want to thank you guys so much for all of the questions, for all of the love. I'm so glad you guys have been enjoying my content recently and for letting me know. It means the world. If you want to see more like this, just let me know. Ask more questions. I am so happy to talk about this. I appreciate you all more than you will ever know. I love you, my fishes, and I can't wait to chat with you all again in my next video. Happy swimming. Bye.